Horror is one of my favorite genres, but I would be lying to you if I said that I haven't been pretty underwhelmed by several of the recent horror movies that were very highly praised by a vast majority of people. Barbarian, X, Bones and All, and Talk to Me are just some of the recent popular horror movies that did absolutely nothing for me. And that had me a little worried that there may be some kind of disconnect between my taste in horror movies and most other people's current taste in horror movies. And when I started hearing things about Longlegs, such as Seven comparisons, Silence of the Lambs comparisons, people calling it the best horror movie of the decade, the scariest movie of all time, that had me worried, but also a little excited at the same time, thinking maybe this could finally be the one. The description, the vibe, it looks like it may be up my alley. Is a massive fan of Seven, Silence of the Lambs, Fallen, Frailty. Seems like it could be some kind of a combination of all of those movies, but I was still a little cautious because of the recent disconnect. And I am proud and happy to say that this is the exception. What are the kinds of things that people tend to look for in a horror movie? What makes a horror movie great? Atmosphere, tension, vibes, directing. Directing is important with any movie, but I think it is extra important with horror movies. And Oz Perkins directed the hell out of this film. All of the shots had purpose and captured the proper atmosphere of the movie that was carried from the opening scene. This is one of my favorite opening scenes in a horror movie, period, and sets the tone for the rest of the film so well, kind of similar to the opening scene from It. I am actually not a big fan of the 2017 It overall. I think that it kind of lost the vibe of the opening scene, but that opening scene was fantastic. This one felt very similar to me. A very good prologue to what the rest of the movie is going to feel like. The creepiness, the performances, the way that the scenes were shot, fantastic. Of course, just as important as the performances and the shot compositions is the music. And Oz Perkins' brother, Elvis Perkins, composed a fantastic score for this film. What a duo these guys are. Every piece of music perfectly heightened and matched the tone and emotions of every single scene, which is, again, important for every movie, but extra important for horror films. The two most important elements to me when it comes to movies are the plot and the characters, regardless of genre. And Longlegs absolutely excels in both of those regards. If you like serial killer mysteries as much as I do, you will almost certainly dig this. If you like an added supernatural element, you will almost certainly dig this. As far as comparisons go, I'm not entirely sure that Seven or Silence of the Lambs are great ones. About the closest thing that I can think of is Fallen with Denzel Washington, which, by the way, is an incredibly underrated supernatural thriller. If you have not seen it, go check it out. Highly recommend. Or I could maybe compare it to the show The Outsider. So if you like that kind of stuff, a murder mystery, serial killer, cop investigation story with supernatural elements, this is the movie for you, and it remains compelling from start to finish because this investigation that is constantly surprising you is constantly moving forward and throwing new information at you and new questions at you from start to finish. But what's a good plot without good characters to carry you through it? And something that I think those aforementioned recent horror movies were severely lacking were good, strong characters that I was able to get invested in and care about. With Micah Monroe's Agent Lee Harker, This movie has that in spades. In my case, I latched onto her immediately. She is a bit cold, she's a bit distant, she's a bit broken, but she feels like a real, complex human being, and I cared about her journey and was invested in her from the moment she appeared on screen, and Micah's performance was phenomenal. The movie doesn't work nearly as well without her. And, of course, we have the great dynamic with Blair Underwood's Agent Carter, which is incredibly important for films like this. You think, again, back to films like Seven. The best part of that movie, in my opinion, was the relationship between Brad Pitt's David Mills and Morgan Freeman's William Somerset. With a cop investigation movie like this, having a great dynamic between the cop partners is incredibly important, and you even get moments of levity through their interactions throughout the movie, which I also think is very important. So this film shines in the character department. A hero is only as good as their villain, and it's not spoiling anything to say that Nick Cage is the villain. I mean, he is listed second on IMDb as Longlegs, so if you didn't want to be spoiled by that, probably shouldn't have even turned on this video. But without getting too specific, Cage is absolutely terrifying in this movie. I mean, to me, this is legitimately one of the scariest horror villains ever, and one of my favorite Nick Cage performances ever. And the more you learn about him and how he operates, the scarier he gets. From the opening scene, again, I said before that the opening scene set the tone for the rest of the movie. His performance was a huge part of that, and I was with people that didn't even realize that was him in the opening scene. Of course, as it goes along, it's very easy to notice, but this was an incredibly disturbing character, performed very well by a fantastic actor in Nick Cage. There aren't a ton of side characters in this film, which I actually really like. It's very focused on Micah Monroe, and she carries the load really well. However, I do want to give a shout out to a few actors, such as Alicia Witt as Ruth Harker, Lauren Akala as young Lee Harker, I hope I said her name right, Ava Kelders as Ruby Carter, and Carmel Amit as Anna Carter. Man, I may have butchered a few of those names. I apologize. But every single character in this movie had a purpose. Not a single performance was wasted. And last but not least, I have to give a massive shout out to Kiernan Shipka, who has a very small role in this film, but that scene, the one scene that she is in, is incredibly memorable, mainly for her absolutely disturbing and unsettling performance. I didn't even know she was going to be in this movie, and she was almost unrecognizable. I mean, it is mind-blowing that this is the same girl from Totally Killer. She was absolutely incredible in that one scene and completely stole the show. I alluded to this before, but the movie constantly keeps you on your toes, keeps you guessing. You never fully know where it's going to go, where it's going to end. There are multiple occasions where you think you understand what's going on and what certain things mean, and then they pull a 180 on you and say, no, this is actually what's going on. This is actually what it means. And I love that kind of thing. And despite that, it never loses its sense of momentum. So you know that it's going somewhere. You're just not entirely sure where, and that is my favorite type of film. Now, am I saying this is a perfect movie? Definitely not. Am I saying this is now my favorite horror movie of all time, or even in the conversation? Definitely not. And I think that all of the talk about this being the best horror movie of the last decade or the scariest movie of all time were very unfair to the movie, because they set expectations for it that were essentially impossible to meet. And I think that I did a pretty good job of just disregarding all of that and checking my expectations at the door, which is exactly what I would implore everyone else to do. Don't expect this to be the greatest movie of all time. Don't even expect it to be similar to another movie. I've made comparisons such as Seven and Fallen, but it is definitely its own thing, and don't expect it to be the scariest movie of all time. Just expect it to be good, which I believe that it is. I think it has a few flaws. I think the ending could have been a little bit better. Absolutely. I think there were some little inclusions that the movie did, some creative choices that didn't completely work for me. However, that being said, this is finally a horror film that has come out in the last few years that I have really liked, that has lived up to the hype for me, that is totally up my alley, and I am very much looking forward to seeing what Oz Perkins does next. This is definitely one of my favorite horror movies of the past few years. It's got a great atmosphere and very creepy vibe, captured perfectly from the opening scene by the directing and the score. It's got a very compelling serial killer murder mystery plot that keeps you guessing from start to finish. It's got great performances, phenomenal character work, with the lead character played brilliantly by Micah Monroe, someone that I was genuinely invested in and cared about from the moment she appeared on screen. It's got a terrifying, disturbing villain played perfectly by Nick Cage, who brilliantly set the tone for the rest of the movie, starting with the opening scene. This one is a winner, guys. I cannot recommend it enough. If you made it this far, thank you so much for watching. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. Comment your thoughts on Longlegs and the state of horror in general right now. And stay tuned for some more fun content. I will see you soon.